From the heart of Inwood at Inwood Art Works studio, welcome to Inwood Art Works On Air. It's where we meet the musicians, filmmakers, writers, theater makers, technicians, and artists of all stripes who make their home what we affectionately call upstate Manhattan. I'm your host, Aaron Sims, and today we welcome audio engineer and mixer Michael O'Reilly. Michael is a Grammy Award-winning engineer for his work recording and mixing Dianne Reeves' A Little Moonlight, Best Jazz Vocal Album. Michael is also the mixer engineer of 11 Grammy Award-winning albums and 6 Grammy Award-nominated albums, as well as 15 platinum, 19 gold, and 8 multi-platinum records. Remember records, kids? Simply put, most of us have heard the familiar sounds he's captured through our lives. Take, for instance, the Prince song, I Feel For You, recorded by Chaka Kahn, or the very first single, You Give Good Love, from Whitney Houston's debut album, Whitney Houston. Michael began his career at New York legendary Atlantic Record Studios as assistant engineer, where he honed his craft. He gained experience working with a range of mega artists from Rolling Stones, Bette Midler, George Carlin, Aretha Franklin, and Charles Mingus, to name a few. Michael has the distinguished honor of working alongside legendary producer Aretha Martin on virtually all of Reeves' projects over the last 30 years. As a recording engineer and mixer, Michael has worked in a wide variety of musical genres where he's comfortable recording a 60-piece orchestra or a solo guitar. He has worked with a roster of artists as diverse as the Bee Gees, David Bowie, Smashing Pumpkins, Los Lonely Boys, Jewel, Queen Latifah, and Eric Clapton, just to name drop all those people on you. Michael also freelances on several broadcast television shows, such as The Late Night with Stephen Colbert. Our buddy David Letterman preceded him, and Saturday Night Live, and Jimmy Fallon. In addition, he's taught adjunct instruction of music engineering at NYU. He's had a very long career, but we're catching him in mid-career here at Inwood Art Works On Air. I'm thrilled to talk to him about his life and what's like your journey to here and now. What was that on The Hobbit? Here and now. But first, let me tell you, thanks again, Michael O'Reilly, for joining me on Inwood Art Works On Air.
Well,
welcome.
thank you for having me, Aaron.
You bet.
My pleasure.
It's great to have a neighbor here in the house.
Yeah, it's
in our new house.
In our brand new house too. You can smell the paint.
You can. There you go. Well, it's great to see. How you been?
I've been fine. Thank you.
Good. Well, so let's go back to, everyone likes a good origin story.
Sure.
So what enticed you to the world of audio engineering out of all the things you could pick and pursue?
Well, I love playing guitar.
Okay, so you're a musician.
Of course, I was in bands as a kid, and until I got into so better bands and said, they're much better than I am. I don't know if I'm going to be a guitarist professionally. So I had a little interest, a little bit in electronics. So I went to, State School, Farmingdale. I started going for electrical engineering. And I was there for maybe about 2 years total. And they took us to a place, it was called Cutler Hammond Industries. And it was something out of like a movie where there was a workbench, if you can picture a workbench with a light and a guy sitting there with soldering irons, but like 100 of these guys just going into the distance, wow. Right? All land there. And they all had pinups, and the pinups were of like missile guidance systems. So it was like, this is what you can be doing. And I'm like, that's not what I want to do. And I said, okay, I'm not going to pursue this. And then I found I said, well, I like records. What do they do in records? So there was a school just opening. It was called the Institute of Audio Research. There were no colleges at that point. I mean, I teach at 2 different NYU schools, but there really weren't anything. And there was some engineers that started the school. It was down on University Place. And I think it was like in the second year that they started it. So I went, it was like a 9-month program. So I went through it, and toward the end, it was maybe a month or 2 before the end of the program, one of the teachers came up to me just after class, which I was a quiet kid. So there was a lot of kids who were all over him all the time. I don't know why he came to me. I still don't know to this day. But he said, there's an opening for an assistant engineer at Atlantic Records at their recording studio. And it was at the corner of Columbus Circle, 60th and Broadway. And so I just said, okay. So we were at the school, and it was a little they had even rented a recording studio to teach at because they couldn't, they didn't have the space. And it was a place called Green Street. It became popular later on, but it was called Big Apple. And so I went, at the end of class, literally, I went and took my nickel, I put it into the payphone, and the studio manager just answered, and they gave me that. He said, well, come on up now. I'm like, okay. Boom. I went down, got in the subway, went 20 minutes later, I'm at Columbus Circle. I go to meet him. His office is right at the corner there where it's like a triangle. It's a beautiful second floor view there. And he said, I'm going to take you back to the studio. I went in, and there was a session going on. And this engineer, his name was Jimmy Douglas, he's a famous engineer. And he was working with a band. The band was called Slave. It was like an R&B band. And I went in the room, and he had the tape machine there, it's running. He gave it to me, and he said, here, punch in at this number. And I'm like, okay. And I got dyslexic. I'm not dyslexic, but I got it. I switched the numbers around, and I hit record, and I realized I did it, and I stopped it because I erased something. He turned to me, he said, okay. And I'm like, oh, there's my interview. It's over, right?
Right.
And that was it. I got hired after that. So it was really funny. And, when I think about today and, to get a job as an assistant, you'll be there for 2-3 years maybe before they even let you get in the rooms. This was literally like off the street, into here, grab it in the middle of it. When I think about how it was. And recently he did an interview, because I've known him for a long time. He was talking about the early days. He was there a little before me. He said there were no assistants. There were nothing. We were just going by the seat of our pants. Atlantic Records was getting really big at that time, and they just were kind of all hands on deck. So I came in a little after that, but still, that was the attitude of the place. And I got the job. So it was from the frying pan to the fire is what I like to say.
Wow.
And I went back, I called the school, I'm not going to finish the school, and they gave me my certificate anyway at the end. But
we're just starting out.
I never went back.
We need you to graduate. We had to get a quota for our next group.
Yeah, so literally that's the story,
Wow.
And then I saw people years later, they were still trying to find work in the industry. Purely lucked out.
Yeah.
Pure lucked out.
Sometimes it takes a guy, right?
Yeah.
It's always a guy you know.
Yeah. And so that's what I did. And then from there, I started working with Aretha, the producer. Yeah. And, at first I didn't know who he was until I looked him up and realized, and there was no internet, there's none of that stuff in that day, and then I'm talking, oh, that record, I know that record. And so, again, as an assistant, he took me under his wing, and I worked up through him doing almost all of these projects. Most of them were done.
Would you consider him a mentor to you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he was like my uncle. He was he'd invite me over the house, and we were like, he was like my father, like another father, or I call him my uncle, whatever. But so we had a very good relationship for 30 years before he passed away in 2006. Got it. In fact, the film I sent you, I don't know if you got a chance to even look at that. We were working on that when he passed away, and you can see he passed away before it was finished. But that film really was about all his compositions that he wrote from the 1950s and everything. But he'd bring artists back that he had worked with to do his music, and his music was pretty dense. It wasn't pop music or anything like that. Even though he did so much of pop music,
right. He
was a real jazz guy and arranged. He wrote an opera, classical opera. All the stuff he did. So
is that the All My Friends Here album?
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's the album of the songs that were in there. But, so these artists would come back, and he'd put Chaka Kahn to do like a jazz thing and different people. So he would kind of mix it up, you know what I'm saying? And so for him, it was just a chance to really do maybe what he wanted to do or thought he was going to do at the beginning of his career. Yeah. And he did it at the end. So.
Do you have that in you as well? Do you have an album you want to do?
No, but I do like playing though still, but not as much. But I played on some records, Bette Midler and a few things, or Jewel, just a guitar part I heard. And that was the other thing. I mean, he was an arranger producer, and everybody calls themselves producers nowadays, and it doesn't mean
it's bought the guy and sold quite easily.
Everybody, it doesn't. I'm sorry to say, but it doesn't mean a lot. I have to
It's totally cheapened everything, including in theater as well.
Yeah. So so when I look at what he is capable of doing, or taking a simple song and flushing it out into something, even Dianne Reeves talks about a Carly Simon thing she heard. That's when she realized, wow, this is not just a producer. arranger producer is what he was. He can take it pen to paper and come up with beautiful arrangements of any kind of songs, So that was his forte. And so, I learned a lot from him. By osmosis, you're there every day,
Yeah.
So it's a very different story. Yeah.
Well, you're a seasoned veteran of so many of these stories, and can you speak a little bit? I mean, you said it's been a long time, 30 years behind the dials or so. How's technology changed the way you work?
Well, it changed a lot of things, to be honest with you. Some of it's good. I was just talking a little bit about this recently, where there's a piece of software can do what it used to take me hours to do.
Right.
And so those things are good, but it's like everybody else is still worried about AI, and a lot of, I look because I'm a teacher, I get a lot of students like, hey, can you write me a recommendation letter? Where can I try? Any studios you think I could try to get work? I mean, it's an obvious thing. And, I look at the job, so I'm looking at the Indeed and all these things out, and I've seen all these audio jobs for kids for like, whatever, $50 an hour or more. I'm like, that's paying a lot. And I read about it. It says, all you have to do is mix and kind of the things we do, but you're training AI, and that's what they're doing. And I'm looking at it, I'm like, okay. So it's really like, okay, you want to hire these people, so basically you're going to put them out of a job once the AI knows enough to be able to do these simple things that they're doing, And so it's really kind of not something I really like, to be honest with you. I mean, some of it you have to use. It's part of some new softwares. But if I can use it in conjunction with what I do artistically, then, okay, it's a tool. It's like, I could walk from here to there, but maybe I can take a car. It's going to be faster. That kind of thing is okay.
A tool, yeah. As a tool, not a crutch.
As a tool, not as a replacement.
Yeah.
And I think there's, I look at these things that they're going, and then, of course, the kids are coming out, and a lot of these studios, places that I learned from, are not around anymore, or they're there on a much smaller basis, And it's a very different world, because the technology became something that everybody could have, at least, let's go back at least 10, 15 years. And there was a time when, if you wanted to record professionally, you had to go to a studio.
And you had to use Pro Tools.
Or whatever.
Or something like that.
This is before Pro Tools.
Before Pro Tools,
use, even the analog mode, analog 24-track. Then that came eventually. I mean, we had little cassettes you can do at home and make something, but it was still not going to be the same quality. Once the software came and once it became computer-based, then everybody had a playing field. Everybody could have the Ferrari, so to speak.
Yeah.
You could have the Ferrari in your bedroom, or it could be in a studio, but it's the same piece of gear. And it gives a little bit, I understand it from the musician's point of view. It's like, hey, we can now play.
I have an orchestra at my disposal.
Only so many people could get in the door. Now we can all get in the door.
Yeah.
And that's fine, and I do understand that. It also waters down the whole other end of things. So I've seen both sides of that coin, and we live with it. But they come, nowadays, most of the students are coming from their bedrooms. So what I try to do, at least from teaching, is like, hey, this is the studio. Let's use this. This is something that is going to bring a collaboration, which you don't really have when you're by yourself and you're just hitting keys and samples of everything. How do musicians interact? How can you incorporate it? And I don't say to them or anything like, this is bad what you're doing, but why don't you make hybrid things? Have real people playing on some of this with it, and interact with the software where you can have artistry happen.
That was good. You were leading me right down the road about, you mentioned teaching, and also this with technology is that, other than honing and executing techniques, I mean, there's overreaching concepts that need to be learned. And so what are the biggest takeaways are you trying to instill in this new group of students?
Is basics. It's like anything else. It's basics, and I try to drive that home. I mean, we just did this the other day. I had a quartet come in to the class to record. And after the class, I said, wow, that was so cool. And it's like, first of all, they're all women, and so that's a thing. There's not a lot of women or have been traditionally in this field. So it brings them in. A lot of my students are women. So to see other people, the women working on that and being functional musicians, it was empowering for them. And I think it was something that they get to see. But it's like, hey, we just did this against something with each other. It wasn't one person by themselves in a headphone. It was interacting and how that really is something that can take something that you're doing and have people collaborating. Collaboration is a big thing. So that I try to instill, but also just the basics, what you really do need to know. And you get the kids on the other hand, some people are really cocky. Hey, I can do this and, time a bunch of keys, it's all programmed and it's really cool. But I'm like, that's cool, that sound. But somebody made that sound that you're using. You didn't make it. So learn how to make that sound. Then you could use the software, but now it's your sound because you created that. You're not just grabbing it off the internet or whatever it is, So it's trying to personalize some of that. And the basics have never changed. And that's the good thing. The equipment can change, but those basic things, or how to even interact with people, an artist.
Where would you send someone to start off, like a young Michael O'Reilly back in the day, nowadays? Like, where would you start off now if you're interested in doing what you're doing?
Well, I'd send them to school because I'm teaching it. But
there you go.
But that's
if you can't afford NYU Steinhardt or
if
Tisch.
Not, you have to try to get into a studio like I did in the old ways. And it still exists. They'll still take people, but they're a lot more picky now because they have a lot more people trying to get in and different things. And the prerequisite of how far you go, even for interns, you really they have to fight for everything. So it's a different world in that
Different
sense.
world.
Yeah.
Do you find people don't play live together much anymore either?
Well, to a degree.
Yeah.
To a degree, yeah. And I think that's the other thing. I bring a real band in, and we could do the whole thing, but set up and to get a good track or two, it's an hour and a half. And they're like, how'd you do all that from nothing? And it's like, well, I know sound and how to do that, but I know musicians, and I know the better musicians who can give you what you need. There's a whole interaction thing, where, if you take a really bad band, I could make that bad band sound better, but nobody's going to want to hear that record. I don't care how good the sound is if the performance isn't there. And that's the other thing I try to instill in them is like, you have to be genuine with what you do, And that's the other thing with algorithms and all these Spotify and whatever. Whatever you listen to, it just gives you more and more of the same. When I came up, I had my guitar period, I had my prog period, I got my traditional jazz.
Your Moog.
It didn't matter. I wanted to hear different things, and I'd find within that stuff something that related to me. I can understand them. But I would want to hear different things. And everybody's so pigeonholed by the technology, a lot of it. It's, you look at algorithms for anything. You all of a sudden your inbox or whatever, you have more and more of the same.
Yep.
It puts you in a narrow lane. And the thing I liked about late 70s, mid 70s, things were open. You'd hear, not that all the things
FM radios
were good,
yeah.
even AM radio, like things would just change. And it's like, wow. That's what you should be doing.
Yeah.
You don't limit yourself to something. And I think that's the thing that's hard for them to understand.
It's a great point. I really think it's a great point. And diversity is key, and that's how you grow.
Yeah, that's it.
Well, you've been so diverse, as I read in your bio, so many names and so many other people. Are there any particular sessions or moments you recall that are particularly memorable for you?
Oh, yeah.
And it could be about figuring out, like, listen, because just riffing off what you're talking about, listening to bands, and you listen to more and more bands, you figure out what's going right, what's going really, really wrong.
Yeah. And, a lot of that stuff, when I came in, a lot of these guys was like, Will Lee, Richard T. was piano player. These are guys just in New York, just that session musicians were amazing.
Yeah.
But, I got, everything was pretty much band oriented then. Synthesizers were just kind of coming in to things like that. But as a young guy, I start, I get into like the Rolling Stones at night would come in, I would always say the Glimmer Twins, and you knew that who it was going to be. And
that was their recording name, the Glimmer Twins?
The Glimmer Twins, that's what they went under, because nobody would put their name on a thing, so it was a little hush-hush, but everybody knew who it was. But so we'd be doing that and till night, and then Mick would come in, maybe 7 at night if you're lucky, and leave about 1, and Keith would show up to the 11 o'clock the next day. Those kind of sessions you were on, but it was like, and nobody got credit for it, but it was like, that was one of the early things I did. It was a Tattoo You I was on, and I forget the other one, but late 70s, early 80s.
Yeah.
And but one night, this is what I remember, was like, this is before wireless, so they would have the guitar plugged in, and they have really long cables, right, to run around. So there was like, hey, you can do a wireless thing now where it all works. And they were like, okay, you got to prove it. I can't remember the company that came, but they gave him a wireless setup. So this is around 2 a.m. So we're at Atlantic. We're at Atlantic Studios. We're on the corner of 60th and Broadway. It's Columbus Circle, and the building has a little triangle. So we got the keys to the office of the manager, and we brought an amplifier down or two, and we opened the windows and stuck the amps facing out into Columbus Circle. So Mick and Keith went with these things down into Columbus Circle, jamming on guitars at 2 o'clock in the morning to see how far they can go before the wireless crap.
All the pigeons go.
Yeah, the pigeons go. There wasn't many people around at 2 in the morning at Columbus Circle. Yeah. So that was it. But I just remember that was, vividly remember that time. So that was just a weird story about that. But
that's a great story about wireless.
Yes. Yeah. So, I got to meet a lot of people. And you mentioned George Carlin before.
Yeah, that's interesting, right?
That was totally interesting, too, because he had done an album. It's called A Place for My Stuff. And half the album is a live concert that he recorded over a couple of days. And the job initially was to go in, and we were kind of editing, different nights for the comedy routine. And what happened was, then the rest of the record was literally, we created in the studio. He had a game show going on, and he got the organist from Yankee Stadium. His name was Eddie Layton. And he comes in and he has a captain's suit on with the hat. He looks like, remember Thurston Howell III from Gilligan's Island?
Sure, of course.
He had that look with the captain's hat, and he lived on a houseboat on 79th Street. So he came into the studio and he played the organ. And I don't know if I could say this on the air, but the name of the name of the bit was called Asshole Jacko F. Scumbag. And it was like, is he an asshole? And we're all in the studio. Asshole, Jacko. So we're making this game show up with the organ and all this stuff. So this is kind of the idea of what we were doing. And so it became, he had to finish the record. It was 4th of July, and the engineers, I was still an assistant then. Yeah. These are all when I was assistant engineer. They left, and it was like, they said, George wants to come in on the 4th of July to finish editing. Can you do it? And because the engineers didn't want to do it. I said, okay, I'll do it. It was new for me. So I went in, made one edit on the thing, and I was kind of late on it, but it made it funnier, And so George said, no, it's a little late. And I'm like, George, you got to leave it. It's really funny. Now, when I think about it, it's like I'm telling George Carlin what's
George, let me give you some
funny,
comedy lessons
right?
here.
Yeah, exactly. Ridiculous. But it was funnier, and he left it in. It was just a pause, and it just made, he's like, yeah, I think you're right. So we did, I'm just saying that as a side. It was kind of just me and him.
That's part of your contributions to the work.
And that was really it. And in those days, I think I was taking home like $375 a week, all right? This is early 80s, maybe late 70s, whatever that record was, you can look it up. But the point was that at the end of the night, he's like, comes up to me, he says, hey, man, thanks for coming in. And he had a check in his hand, and he left, and I opened up, and I got $1,000. Now, for a kid, for $375, I was like, I just made $1,000 in a day. That's 3 weeks' salary, or even more, So,
sure.
So I always have like such fond memories of like,
frame that check, man.
What a guy! I should have, yeah, right. But that kind of stuff would happen in the studio back then.
It's also about saying yes and being available, right?
That was people, exactly what
maybe another cultural thing, a generational thing. I don't know. People like when you give you an opportunity knocks, you got to listen and open the door and take it.
That's
right?
absolutely true. And yeah, that's hard to instill people. It's like even if you're not ready, go for it. You're probably ready on some level.
If it makes you uncomfortable, it might be a good sign. If you're nervous, you might be ready.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's really great.
But we had I got other stories, but that's. But if you want to know,
we'll take all the stories you got. But I know you're also. I just want to mention as well.
Yeah, go ahead.
That is just quickly that you also freelance on late night shows as well. With a great variety of audio positions over the years and unique situations and challenges. Can you talk about any of those that you faced and how late night TV broadcast differs from what you're doing work and recording?
Well, when I started initially, my first thing, I did go, I went Saturday Night Live for one time. I think it was YouTube was there. And I just sat through that, just looking really and observing. Yeah. And then I got to sit in and work music for Fallon for a couple couple days. But that was kind of it. It was just a quick thing.
Very cool. But I think people love stories like that. And, and again, taking opportunities. And
it's all opportunities, finding it. And I keep saying the more opportunities you have, the more things you say yes to, the more people you're going to meet. And things come back. And you may not see somebody for a couple of years, and all of a sudden you get a call. It's building your network.
Totally. It's all great advice. Yeah. Michael, we've taken a lot of your time already. Is there anything else you'd like to share? Any place? Do you have a website you can send people to?
You know what? I don't, and I really should.
All right. Well,
it's time to set it up.
Tell you what, if you want to get in touch with Michael, you can email me, and I can put you in touch with Michael maybe.
Yeah.
But Michael, thank you so much for taking the time
you're
today.
welcome.
Man.
Yeah,
I really appreciate all your stories. And
I have more stories if you want them.
Well, if you want to give us one more parting story, give us a parting story.
I'll give you one. And that is, recently I just got, there's two authors doing some books. One's on sampling, and the other one is on the Feel For You album, Chaka Kahn, which I mixed the song on. I was also an assistant back then. I was doing stuff. And it was just, they're kind of breaking this down. It's something called 33 1/3. It's a series that's out of England about different records, and they're really.
For those of you who don't know, 33 1/3 is the RPMs on the old,
sure.
long players, short players,
that's right? That's it. So they're doing that whole album, and it was a whole thing about the sounds on that particular song, "Feel For You," because I guess it's listed as a kind of a groundbreaking thing because they had Melly Mel rapping on it, Stevie Wonder's playing harmonica, and the song was a Prince song. And totally taken in a different direction. And so there's a thing about that, the beginning of that, where he's rapping in the middle and Aretha was playing. We had a sampler. It was one of the early samplers. It was a mono sampler. Had nothing, there was no keyboards or anything. And so you just hit a button, kind of try to play it in time. And he played it in the wrong spot. He was trying to stop it. And there wasn't a stop button on it, so he was hitting the button he knew, which he was re-triggering every time. So it was Chaka, Chaka Kahn, Chaka. And then we started, he's like, maybe we should do that. And it was just like a happy accident where, it kind of like just became like the signature of the song.
I was going to say, that is totally the signature for that song.
Yeah. And then if you remember the song, there's all these these noises going into the choruses. And everybody thinks it's like scratching, but what it was, the multi-track tape machines, which is where all the music was, we would stop and start it with maybe some reverb on it. And if you stop machines, you could start them up. They were called ramping up and down. And they would make, sounds and noises. And we recorded those noises to another tape machine just randomly. Mm-hmm. So all these random noises. And we actually measured whatever it was, like here's a quarter note, here's an eighth note of that tempo. And then we took all these noises and measured them. So it's all in time, technically, if you're counting, but the noises are all over the place. And it became like a signature kind of thing for that song. And it's just come around, I don't know how many years it is, back in the mid-'80s.
That was
there.
Mid-'80s for
Mid-'80s,
sure, yeah.
So it's like two different people are writing about this thing at the time. So it's funny how things circle around, like of interest again. And, it's just funny. It just happened to be coincidence. I was just talking to the guy like 2 days ago about doing an interview.
And you made a legendary hit. Because of experimentation of people not knowing how to use a machine.
Yeah, but it's all by hand. That was the point.
Exactly. But it was artists and engineers and mixers all trying to figure out, but working again, going back collaboratively.
Yeah.
Working collaboratively, and the artist going back to the Carlin thing, whatever else. It's like, hey, wait, leave that in. It's their choice at the end of the day, the artist's choice at the end of the day.
Obviously.
And it's like, how great it is to feel you can contribute to something like that sticks around and does well.
Well, that's one of the things I also want to say, just going back to Aretha and him, that even though I was the engineer, if I had an idea for something, I would sing it to him. I didn't write or play it. And he'd listen, man, I like that. He'd incorporate it. There wasn't a sense, and there was on other people's, but with him, he was obviously the producer, I'm the engineer, but we crossed so many times, like he would tell me, hey, can you make that sound like that? Oh yeah, okay. So, or I would have an idea, and he was open to that, back to the collaboration thing, and that is something that's really important.
Best idea in the room should win, right?
Sometimes. That's it.
Or it's the best when you have the time.
Well, in the music, we used to say, we're all serving the song, including the artist, who may have written it and sing it. If we all serve the song, we're going to come out with a good record, and we kind of let the egos sit behind. I think that's a really important point.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's a great one to end on, man.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that wonderful story.
You're welcome.
Michael, much appreciate your time here on Inwood Artworks On Air. Folks, again, if you want to get in touch with Michael, get in touch with me.
Right.
You know how to do it through our website, all right? info@inwoodartworks.nyc. Thanks again to Michael Rowley for joining us in this Artist Spotlight episode of Inwood Artworks On Air. Again, it's where we meet the musicians, writers, theater makers, and artists of all stripes who make their home here in Uptown NYC. If you have a moment, please show us some love right now and rate and review this podcast 5 stars on whatever platform you're listening to. We really appreciate it. Many thanks to our engineers, John and Gary here for supporting us, and also to hightights.com for Uptown promotional support. Hey, you can support On Air and all of our programming by making a tax-free donation to Inwood Artworks at inwoodartworks.nyc/donate, or via Venmo at Inwood Artworks. It's tax deductible. We greatly appreciate it. Follow us on social media to keep up all that we do, which includes the Inwood Film Festival, Filmworks Alfresco, live concert performances, and so much more. Inwood Artworks On Air is proud to be supported in part by public funds from the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs in partnership with the City Council. And Inwood Artworks programming is made possible by the New York State Council on the Arts, the support of the Office of the Governor, and the New York State Legislature. From the top of Manhattan and the bottom of my heart, thank you for tuning in. Sarah and Sims for Inwood Artworks On Air.